You know what? I did want to talk about this. So we've been debating people on the channel about this. We recently had a debate with Cam Higbee about Trump's first 100 days in office, and I really pressed him on the fact that Gabbard was a terrible intelligence pick. He defended her as a great pick, as one that has all of the credentials and is, you know, fantastic in all these ways and such. My concern was he was going to pick people, and I can remember the exact names I said. I said I was afraid he was going to pick people like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK to be in top field positions, and people told me that they would almost certainly not get a position that night. I don't remember if you were one of those people who did not believe that night that Tulsi Gabbard would become the top intelligence official in the country, or RFK would become the top health official in the country. But those are things that concern me. And so how do you feel about the people we ended up choosing for the top cabinet positions?
I feel really good about it. I actually think that Tulsi Gabbard and RFK are like very interesting examples because I've heard, you know, from you and other people this whole time, like Trump is only going to pick people. Maybe you didn't say to this extent, but like only people he can trust, right? He's only going to pick people who will never defy him or have a different opinion than him.
What we say, like loyalty, right?
Well, sure. But like Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat her entire life. RFK was a Democrat and is an independent. He doesn't agree with Trump on the fundamentals like Diet Coke. RFK wants to ban Diet Coke. Trump has a button for Diet Coke on his desk. These are people who like fundamentally disagree with him on a lot of issues, but he has them in his cabinet regardless of the fact that they might disagree in some spaces. So I think that they're very interesting picks. I think I know there are a lot of concerns around RFK. I think that Tulsi Gabbard is an incredibly competent pick. I think that she's probably one of the best and most qualified people that he chose
to hold
for
that position. Do you think the best and most qualified to hold that position?
I think that she is one of the best and most qualified picks.
If she was, if Trump was looking at all of the best people to hold a position, which is what the president should do, you're the president of the United States, you should choose from the best of the best, right? You know, he said no more, or we're going to do this woke nonsense where we pick subpar people due to some like quota. We're going to go for American excellence. And do you think that Tulsi Gabbard, out of all the intelligence people that could hold that position, or all the, you know, intelligence experts, is the best person for the job?
It's certainly perceivable that there are people who are more qualified than Tulsi Gabbard, right? But there's always going to be somebody who's like a tier above, right? That doesn't take into account the fact of like maybe somebody who's more qualified didn't want the job, or they didn't want to work under Trump, or they're a Democrat, or
rung of the ladder too.
I don't think Tulsi's the bottom rung of the ladder. She's spent her entire career in the military and intelligence, specifically in the military. She's served on intelligence committees within Congress. She has an incredible qualification for this position.
Okay. So if we're saying
you're never going to have somebody who was the DNI, right? Like the DNI is the top of the ladder, right? So you're never going to have somebody who was above DNI. But you can have
somebody who worked in a high level position for an intelligence agency, or somebody who managed other human beings at an intelligence agency. Because I'll agree that through Tulsi Gabbard's multiple positions in the armed forces, she has had to decide, you know, look at intelligence. She's had to handle classified intelligence before. The exact value of that classified intelligence, or like how classified it was, could be disputed. But there's a difference between having to handle classified intelligence, or having been experienced with classified material, and having to be the top intelligence official in the entire country, managing all of the intel that's coming in and having to determine for the president of the United States what is good intel and what is bad intel. And when I'm hearing that she's the person, of course, who has the responsibility of briefing the president, and then the president comes out with reports like the Ukrainians have been encircled in Kursk, and then he says it multiple times, even though we know from Reuters reports that he has been briefed on the matter, which he should be, because any competent administration would. And this makes me concerned because, you know, it would be one thing if, you know, immediately I started to see some impact and Tulsi Gabbard's experience started to make Trump kind of correct course from some of the nonsense he says in public. But I haven't seen that impact. We've had some high profile intelligence scandals, but I haven't seen the impact of Tulsi Gabbard using her, let's just say, on the ground grassroots experience in the military to improve, you know, the president's knowledge of intelligence, which is her main responsibility.
I don't think no matter who you could have the most qualified person on the planet, and that doesn't mean that person's going to be able to change Donald Trump's opinion of what he's going to say. Trump is going to say whatever he wants to say, regardless of, somebody says this or whatever. If he believes something to be true, he's generally going to take into account what his advisors are saying. But if he truly believes something to be true, he's going to say it regardless of, Tulsi Gabbard's not going to be able to sway his opinion. Nobody could in that position. But Tulsi Gabbard served in military intelligence. As far as personnel management goes, she was lieutenant colonel in the United States military, which means that there was a lot of people under her command. I don't know how many, but it's a rather high position. She served in the military dually while serving in Congress. She had access. So I don't know. I think she was a great pick.
Okay, so what is the job of Tulsi Gabbard in her current role? Like, what's her job?
She is the highest ranking intelligence officer in the United States.
And so she's the one who does what?
In charge of managing. She's in charge of managing classified information and managing the people who classify and declassify information. I mean, DNI has a lot of roles, but
okay. Would you say in a role like that having good judgment when it comes to classifying intelligence as legitimate or non-legitimate would be useful?
What do you mean by that?
And then after the opening statement, after like the first two bullet points, proceeded to know fucking nothing about Tulsi Gabbard. And I think that seems to be a consistent pattern from a lot of her defenders, is that they just don't know anything about her actual skill set. And if they do know about her record of what she said, at best they've chosen to overlook it in the hopes that maybe she can figure out being the top intelligence official, because when she worked for the Army, she handled classified intelligence. Now, when you say handle classified intelligence, I don't mean that she was a top intelligence official. I don't mean that she gathered intelligence. I don't mean it. I mean that she was given some in order to analyze it for herself and her work. Not that she managed a bunch of people. And so her qualification is that she has been in a position to receive intelligence. That's not... Congratulations. You were in a place where you had to know something important. That doesn't mean that you should be the controller of all important knowledge, which is, as top intelligence official, when it comes to national security issues, that's what you're supposed to be doing and presenting that to the president. And given her record of Russophilia, given her record of Bashar al-Assad apologia, given her record of, hyping up the biolabs in Ukraine as a legitimate threat to Russia after the Russians, invade Ukraine. After she's gone through all these ringers, I think it's pretty clear that, oh wow, she's in the National Guard. Give her the biggest promotion ever known to man. I just don't think it's, not only do I think it's necessary, I think it's undermining intelligence when there's so many other people of higher quality. Just some suit who's boring, that'll scroll through the information and make sure to give the government every detail, every bit of important context so the president understands the situation. Because at the top of the list of Gabbard's jobs is presenting classified information to the president, preparing his classified daily brief. So I think if you're falling for the biolab stuff, maybe you're not a good intelligence analyzer, let alone somebody who should be managing all the intelligence in that inroad to the president. But if you can't analyze it well, you certainly can't deliver the message to Trump well. So I thought it was only a matter of time before Gabbard eventually had some sort of a scandal. And the signal scandal was, an intelligence scandal, but most of the blowback hit, of course, Mike Waltz, who is now no longer national security advisor. He has been made UN ambassador, a clear demotion. Anybody can go back and check the tarmac video, which is very sad for Waltz, poor Waltz, and very sad for Mike Johnson, who had to spend a lot of money in a race to replace him for a guy who only served in the Trump administration for like 100 days. The other person that was in the signal scandal was Pete Hegseth, because we're finding out that he gave, certainly sensitive information about flight paths and weapons used and the type of aircrafts used for the air campaign against the Houthi, movement in Yemen. By the way, that's been a massive failure. We're not going to talk about that on today's stream. Maybe we'll talk about that on tomorrow's stream or a stream next week. But Trump's intervention in Yemen cost us $1 billion in munitions. We were firing munitions faster than we could produce them. We started to create panic in other commands that had to have a stockpile of weapons in the event that a war broke out. And you were removing options from the president of the United States to respond to a security crisis if he just simply has less bang in his gun. And they were firing at such a rate that they were losing the bang in their gun. And so they've pulled off, and they're trying to find some other way to move forward, because after Obama's tried, after Biden tried, I mean, not in this style, but he did try in some way to apply pressure. And now Trump's trying the bombing again, and it didn't work. Anyway, someone like Tulsi Gabbard might be there to give him the intelligence of a lack of progress, meaning we don't need to scare our commanders with low stockpiles. And I do also want to throw out there that a big basis for blocking aid to Ukraine is that we need all this assets, we need all these resources to be redirected toward the Pacific theater. And then if you immediately start your administration with a massive air campaign against the Houthis that blow through all these weapons, it doesn't communicate authentically. Well, anyway, Tulsi Gabbard might have been there to fix the situation, but I'm sure she was busy with something else of equal import. And so I want to tell you the last update we have, which shows a scandal that is Tulsi specific. It's a Tulsi specific scandal. It is not a Pete Hegseth scandal. It is not a Mike Waltz scandal. It's a Tulsi scandal. And that is that she fired intelligence group leaders because they wrote a assessment of Tren de Aragua, the gang in Venezuela, that would not allow them to use it as a justification for the use of the Alien Enemies Act. So for those of you who don't know, the Alien Enemies Act was an act signed into law during the very, very, very start of this country, like 1780 something or 1790 something or 18, like the first 30 years, after there was a certain amount of fear that was going around Congress that the French, after they had assisted us with aid and there was the revolts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that we would be dragged into a war with them through manipulation or through fire or through something. And so the Alien Enemies Act was the project of that. And what the Alien Enemies Act does is basically make it that if you use it, you can deport people of an enemy nation with very little to like no due process. You can basically say goodbye, sayonara. Now, we're not at war with Venezuela. Maduro would probably not be in power if, we went there sort of bombing everything. He would be gone. But Maduro is still there. And even after the last fraudulent election, he is still there. So we're not at war with Venezuela. And so you can't use Venezuela as a justification for the use of the Alien Enemies Act. And so what the Trump administration has done is said that Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang, is invading the United States, i.e., some of its members have crossed illegally into the southern border. That is not an invasion. You could talk about like human smuggling that's on the border. You could talk about, illegal border crossings. You could talk about a lot of things, but it's not that, whether or not people want to call it that. So that's not an invasion, and a Venezuelan gang is not an army of a nation. It is a Venezuelan gang. It's a gang. So it's not an enemy nation. At the Alien Enemies Act, it's not an enemy nation. It's a gang. And using that, extending that to deport others outside of the gang, for example, the gay Venezuelan hairdresser, we have no clue where it went, is not only legally wrong, it's morally repulsive. And so what happened is an intelligence group came together and they produced a report for the government, who asked for one, basically saying that our assessment of whether or not you can use the Alien Enemy Act to do these deportations and throw these people out because you say Tren de Aragua is the alien enemy, it's bogus. It doesn't work. Well, Gabbard has responded to and they didn't, when I say it's bogus, it doesn't work, I don't mean to say that in the report they said it was bogus or they started like insulting Trump. I mean to say that, Okay, I mean to say that the government asked for a report, and the reason they fired them is because they didn't like the answer. So they didn't want a report, they wanted a press release. That's what it sounds like. Let's read a little bit of this and about who got fired. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has fired the top two officials in the National Intelligence Council weeks after the council wrote an assessment that contradicted President Donald Trump's rationale for invoking the Alien Enemies Act, deporting alleged Venezuelan gang members without due process. Gabbard removed Michael Collins, the acting chair of the National Intelligence Council, as well as his deputy, Maria Lagan-Rykoff, according to a spokesperson for Gabbard's office. The actions are the latest purge by Gabbard, who has said she is fighting politicization of the intelligence community, but has removed or sidelined officials perceived to not support Trump's political agenda. So to be clear, the plan is to stop politicization. And so if you do not give the answer in this report that we are looking for that meets our political ends, you will no longer have a job and cannot put food on the table for your kids. I'm sure that these are two qualified, expert men who will go out and find some job somewhere else, whether it's with some company or some whatever, intelligence analyzer, who cares? But when it comes to a lot of the federal workers that have been fired across the country, like for the National Institute of Health, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it's not that easy. The NIC is a top U.S. intelligence community body for analyzing classified intelligence and providing secret assessments to the president and other global top policymakers. Its reports include spy agencies' annual global threat assessment and studies of the possible cause of anomalous health incidents, also known as Havana syndrome. What are we talking about? Okay. Havana syndrome. Having spent 5 years working at the NIC, I can personally attest to the org is the heartbeat of apolitical U.S. all-source analysis, traditionally drawing the best of the IC's intelligence communities, analysts together to tackle and produce assessments on the hardest issue. Jonathan Pakanoff, former Deputy National Intelligence Officer from the Far East, wrote on his X, anything that reduces its independence because policymakers don't like the independent conclusions it reaches is a definition of the politicization they are decrying. Mike and Maria are unbelievable leaders and IC professionals, not political actors, wrote Plankoff, now at the Atlantic Council think tank. And the firings were first reported by Fox. The director is working alongside President Trump to end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, the office of the director of the National Intelligence spokesperson said when asked about the firings. Now, look, I am not surprised Gabbard did this. I'm sure for Trump to pick anyone for this role, that's not to say it's physically impossible for him, but I think in his mind right now, he wants to surround himself with loyalists. And if we're talking about the top intelligence official in the country, yeah, you're going to want her or him, in this case, her, to be loyal to you. And so I think if Gabbard came out and those under her started saying things like, "Oh, the Trendiaragua, legal basis for Trump's unconstitutional action is completely bogus." Tulsi Gabbard's job is to analyze intelligence and to bring it to the president of the United States. Her job is not to make the president feel good. Her job is not to make the president's legal arguments for him. Her job is not to crush and smash and try to sweep under the rug reports that are not flattering towards the president's legal opinions, political opinions, or otherwise. Her job is to analyze intelligence provided to the president of the United States, make sure he is aware of his full list of options, and know what the stakes are, what the threats are. But when these officials produce a report that is not beneficial to Trump's legal interests, that's not beneficial to his attempts to grab our democracy by the neck and squeeze, saying, you know what, Alien Enemies Act says I can deport these Venezuelans without due process. Well, if you don't agree with that, then how can you be an intelligence official? Again, it's not about the legality on the Constitution. It's not about whether the report was good. It's not about any of that. What matters first and foremost is if it helps advance Trump's agenda. And I understand she's in her cabinet. She would want to, generally speaking, advance Trump's agenda. But if your way of doing that is to cover up the truth, is to silence reports that don't make him look good, not only silence the reports, but then fire those who dare not to be the president's personal lawyer when they thought they were an intelligence official. And that's what they want. They want these intelligence officials, and it's not just intelligence officials, it's also FBI officials, it's Department of Justice officials. They want them to be warriors and lawyers for the president. Now, Department of Justice, at least, there's legal minds over there, but these are intelligence officials. They should just be seen as the information brokers. They're coming in with the information and providing it. Why do you need them to specifically change their assessments for your legal arguments? Are they that weak? You can't make it on their own? You have to find some other way? Either way, this to me is just one of many scandals to come, likely with Tulsi Gabbard, both because I don't think she's particularly highly qualified, and also because I think Trump is going to demand of her more things like this, and it's not going to get any less painful. No, it is not. She did not look well during that congressional hearing. She does not sound well when she opens her mouth, and she has shown no particularly, interesting or useful skills when it comes to the intelligence world. Is her days numbered? I don't know. I don't think Trump's angry with her. I don't even think he sees this as a scandal. In fact, I would say he sees something like this, like, oh, this is her doing her job. She's depoliticizing the intelligence community by making it so that they have to agree with me. Depoliticization at its finest. Okay.